Meet Han Taesoo. He doesn't walk across campus for the education, he walks it for the transaction. In a world of debt and deadlines, Taesoo has turned showing up into a science. To his classmates, he's a ghostwriter of presents, a professional bench warmer for the lazy and the wealthy. He slides the menu across the table with the cold efficiency of a loan shark. One attendance is 10,001 at a time. His motto is printed right on the sheet. Nothing in life is free. He doesn't do friend discounts, and he definitely doesn't do small talk. While other students are worrying about their social standing, Taesoo is calculating the cost of a studio apartment. Existing in this city costs $1 million a month, and Taesoo is currently hunting every single coin, of course customers. His classmates joke that he's a robot, a guy who'd trade a girlfriend for 3 months' rent, but they don't see the gas station shifts or the bike rides through the freezing night. The only time he breathes is at 7 a.m., lit by the neon glow of a monitor. He's not playing for fun, he's farming gold, turning digital labor into real-world survival. For Taesoo, every second is an investment. Then, the screen explodes. It's not a boss fight, it's a digital tantrum from a player named Fallon Power Angel. This keyboard warrior is currently questioning Taesoo's lineage with the kind of vocabulary that would make a sailor blush. He's used to the weirdos, but this one is persistent. They aren't just asking how his parents are doing, they're demanding a meetup. Taesoo just stares at the chat logs with a blank face. It's just another day at the office. The neon of the PC bang is replaced by the fluorescent hum of a police station. Taesoo stands there, expecting a shut-in loser, but the girl leaning against the counter is a walking hurricane of piercings and attitude. The officer points a finger, dropping a name that hits Taesoo like a physical blow. This aggressive, loudmouthed delinquent is the owner of the account, Cha Mia. She doesn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. Instead, she points a manicured nail right at his chest and laughs. She isn't just some random troll from the server. She's the ghost that haunted his high school years, now wrapped in a crop top and a leather jacket. She leans in close, announcing their history to the entire room. He's my ex-boyfriend. 5 years ago, Cha Mia was the girl you'd miss if you blinked. She was a shadow in the corner of the classroom, always buried in a book, her eyes hidden behind thick glasses. She didn't have a presence, she had a sanctuary. She was the quiet constant in Taesoo's world, the person who spoke in folded library notes and shy glances. The version of her standing in the police station feels like a glitch in reality. Taesoo remembers the date like a scar, September 27th. They were supposed to meet, but the only thing left of her was a silent house and a sudden vacancy in his life. Her family vanished overnight, leaving no note, no forwarding address, and 5 years of unanswered questions. He spent half a decade wondering why she left without a word, and now she's back, screaming at him over a video game. Is it really her? He studies the piercings in her ears and the sharp edge of her makeup. People change, sure, but this is a total overhaul. He thinks back to the university reunions where old classmates looked unrecognizable, but this isn't just a glow-up, it's a personality transplant. He wants to ask 1,000 things, but the air between them is thick with 5 years of static. Mia isn't interested in nostalgia. She's too busy being insulted that he actually reported her for the game insults. She paces the sidewalk, her voice rising with every step. She expected a "hey, it's you" and a laugh. Instead, she got a 100,001 settlement demand. She stops, turning on her heel to glare at him. Such a petty bastard. When the anger doesn't work, she flips the switch to pitiful. She clasps her hands, eyes sparkling with fake tears, begging him to let the 10,001 slide just this once. It's a masterclass in manipulation, but Taesoo has a black belt in being broke. He doesn't see a crying girl, he sees 10 meals. He puts up a hand, completely unmoved by the performance. Acting pitiful won't work. The comedy dies as the weight of the years settles in. Taesoo watches her, the delinquent persona slipping for just a fraction of a second. He finally asks the question that's been rotting in his head since high school. How has she been? What happened? Mia's smile doesn't reach her eyes this time. She waves a hand dismissively, the streetlights catching the sharp lines of her profile. Nothing happened that's worth mentioning. She doesn't offer an explanation. She offers a clean break. She tells him to focus on the money and forget the face. As she turns to walk away into the dark, her last words hang in the freezing air like a sentence. And just live as if we don't exist. Taesoo stands frozen, watching his past disappear into the city lights for the second time in his life. He told himself it was the best way. He didn't need the money. He just needed an excuse to keep her from vanishing again. But he failed. A month passes, and the routine returns, the classes, the quiet, the absence. That was their ending, or so he thought, until the university broadcast system crackles to life with a name that makes his heart skip a beat. Life has a cruel sense of humor. Standing on the steps of the auditorium is the freshman representative, and the leather jacket is gone. In its place is an oversized hoodie and those familiar thick-rimmed glasses. She looks exactly like the girl who disappeared 5 years ago. Their eyes meet across the crowded plaza, and the world goes silent. Chamia? A moving truck rumbles to life outside, shattering the quiet of the cheapest studio apartment building within walking distance of campus. Taesoo checks the time, 4 days into the semester, and someone actually scored a room in this AOS class dump. He doesn't have high hopes for the new neighbor, but a familiar dread starts to pool in his stomach. His thoughts keep drifting back to the plaza, to the girl who looked like a ghost from his high school years. He can still feel the weight of her glare from that morning. 1 second she's the quiet girl with the glasses, and the next, she's pulling her phone out to report him for existing in her vicinity. He flashes his student ID like a shield, a class of 22 survivor just trying to prove he's not a predator, only to realize his first love is officially his junior. She looks at him with pure disgust and asks, "Are you stalking me? Gross?" She doesn't care about their history or the 5-year gap. She just wants a clean slate and a wide berth. There's no warmth in her eyes, only a sharp, practiced indifference that cuts deeper than any insult. She turns her back on him, throwing a final, icy command over her shoulder. "Let's mind our own business, Sunbae." He tries to shake the lingering attachment, telling himself that the girl in the leather jacket and the girl in the hoodie are both strangers now. It's better this way. There's no way the universe is cruel enough to put her in the room next door. No way at all. Then the doorbell chimes, a sharp ding-dong that sounds like the punchline to a very bad joke. He opens the door to a vision of neighborly perfection, sparkling eyes and a plate of traditional rice cakes. She's mid-sentence offering a sweet hello to her new neighbor until the gears lock and she realizes who's standing there. The sweetness vanishes. Without a word, she slams the plate of rice cake directly into his face. "Don't tell me, you really are a stalker?" She curses her own luck for signing a lease based on price alone, ignoring the guy with the rice cake stuck to his nose. She wants to be a ghost, a neighbor who doesn't exist. Taesoo's ready to agree, to just close the door and forget it, until a muffled sound and the smell of damp concrete drifts from her room. Wait, I feel like I just heard something I shouldn't have. He remembers a different Mia. A girl who lived in the quiet corners of the library, bathed in the golden light of sunset where the only sound was the turning of a page. That was his favorite time of day. Now the girl from the library is threatening to kill him with a fire extinguisher because he called her old. The sunset is gone, replaced by the flickering fluorescent lights of a hallway war zone. He chews on the rice cake she shoved in his face, the sweetness clashing with the memory of her screaming at him to stay away. What happened in those 5 years to turn a library mouse into a high-voltage live wire? She was the one who broke the promise, the one who never showed up. He sits in the glow of his computer, wondering if he's the villain in a story he doesn't remember, until the doorbell rings again. It's Mia again, but the fire is gone, replaced by a shivering, soaking mess. Her pride has finally been drowned out by a burst pipe and a room that's rapidly becoming an indoor pool. Taesoo doesn't hesitate. He's lived in this dump long enough to know the landlord won't answer on a weekend. He's elbowed deep in the water meter, cursing the cold as she watches him from the doorway, huddled and helpless. The way she shivers, gripping her phone like a lifeline, sends a jolt of recognition through him. 5 years ago in the snow she looked exactly like this. The delinquent mask slips, revealing the fragile girl underneath, and for a second, the hallway air feels heavy with everything they haven't said. She catches him looking and snaps, the wall going back up instantly. "Try." He lets the insult slide. His voice drops, losing the businesslike edge. "I'm worried about you." He grabs her arm, not letting her retreat back into her flooded cell. She fights it, swinging a wet mop like a weapon, terrified of owing him anything. She tells him to go to bed and leave her alone, but the way her teeth are chattering tells a different story. "I really don't want to owe you anything, okay?" She's turning blue, and the boiler in her room is dead. Taesoo realizes sincerity won't work with this version of Mia, only logic will. He pivots back to the proxy attendance businessman. If she doesn't want to owe him, she can pay him. A 1,001 per hour. The cost to warm up in my room. It's a ridiculous price, barely enough for a snack, but it's the only way she'll step through the door. She bites her lip, considering the transaction. Then, she ups the ante. For an extra 3,001, she's taking a shower. Taesoo stands in his small room, the sound of the water running behind the bathroom door making his heart hammer against his ribs. He just wanted to keep her from catching a cold, but now he's standing guard while his ex-girlfriend strips down 10 feet away. The steam is rising and Taesoo is spiraling, wondering why she's suddenly so defenseless. But the real disaster isn't in the bathroom. It's the loud, drunken voices echoing in the hallway. His university friends have arrived 10 minutes early, bearing snacks, alcohol, and zero boundaries. "Hey, Taesoo, I heard your place got flooded." His heart drops into his stomach. He forgot the Taesoo Hotel was the designated drinking spot for tonight. They're already splashing through the water in the hallway, curious about the girl next door who caused the flood. If they barge in now, they won't just find a girl, they'll find Mia. The rumors would be lethal. Taesoo tries the impossible. He offers to pay for drinks outside. For a man who counts every one, this is a red flag big enough to be seen from space. "Oh, want a drink outside today?" His friends are convinced he's had a stroke or been replaced by an alien because he offered to buy. They're poking at his face, laughing at the miracle, and for a split second, Taesoo thinks he might actually pull this off. Then, the bathroom door clicks open. The steam pours out, and Mia stands there in borrowed clothes, her hair damp and her guard down. "I'm done showering, Han Taesoo." The room goes dead silent before exploding into a riot of accusations. His friends are losing their minds. Why is a beautiful girl coming out of the Taesoo Hotel shower? They're ready to drag him to the police or the altar. Under the pressure of a dozen questions, Taesoo's brain short-circuits. He grabs Mia by the shoulder and blurts out the first lie he can find. "Actually, she's my little sister." "Yeah, my sister." Mia looks like she's about to bite his hand off, but the social suicide of the truth is worse. He whispers for her to just play along, but a shadow falls over the group. A hand slams against the doorframe with enough force to rattle the hinges. Na Hyun steps into the light, her eyes dark and her smile sharp as a razor. "But how come I never heard about this until now?" Hyun doesn't just walk in, she takes over the room. She's known Taesoo for 10 years, and in all that time, he never mentioned a sister. She leans in, the jealousy radiating off her in waves, demanding the one thing Taesoo can't give her, the truth. "So what exactly is your relationship?" Taesoo's quiet life didn't just flatline, it just became a battlefield. The morning sun hits the university campus, but for Taesoo, it feels more like an interrogation lamp. Na Hyun is hovering, her eyes narrowed into suspicious slits as she walks him to class. She's not buying the emergency plumbing story, and she's definitely not buying the sudden appearance of a long-lost sibling. She leans in, her voice dripping with disbelief. "Are you serious? You really just made it up and said she was your younger sister to cover it up?" Taesoo keeps his eyes locked forward, sweat beading on his neck. He's known Hyun for 10 years, which means she knows exactly how he smells when he's lying. Back in their hometown, she wasn't just a friend, she was a legend with a knack for fighting. They used to call her the crazy chihuahua of Gwangjang-dong. Now, she's pouting and playing the sweet junior, but that childhood instinct is screaming that something about Mia is wrong. The girl currently tugging on his arm used to be the terror of the local taekwondo studio, the youngest of 4 and the only one with enough bite to make middle schoolers run. But even a crazy chihuahua remembers her old neighbors. She stops dead in the hallway, looking Taesoo right in the eye with a look that says the game might be up. "That girl is definitely Mia Uni, right?" Hyun's voice softens, remembering how much Taesoo suffered when Mia vanished 5 years ago without a single word. She's worried, but the heavy air is suddenly punctured by a voice that makes Taesoo's posture snap to attention. It's the student council president, Song Hee-soo. To everyone else, she's a busy senior, but to Taesoo, she's the only person who makes his pragmatic brain actually malfunction. The man who counts every penny suddenly doesn't care about the clock. He pulls out a resignation letter like a victory banner, having quit his overlapping part-time jobs just to help the student council prepare for the school trip. Hyun watches from the sidelines, her jaw dropping as Taesoo transforms into a smiling, tireless volunteer. He carries the heavy boxes with a blush he can't hide, admitting the truth to himself. Song Hee-soo Sunbae is the one I like right now. The guys aren't letting him off the hook that easily. They poke and prod, mocking the guy who never does unpaid work suddenly becoming a charity machine. They're convinced it's because of the incredible looks of this year's freshman, but their teasing takes a sharp turn toward the girl from yesterday. One of them jokes about her being his future wife, unaware they're dancing on the edge of the one lie Taesoo can't afford to break. Work wraps up as the sun dips low. Hee-soo thanks everyone for the hard labor, reminding them of the early start for the department trip tomorrow. Taesoo and Hyun stand together in the cooling air, but the silence between them is heavy. Hyun is still watching him, her smile not quite reaching her eyes as she processes the strange new rhythm of Taesoo's life. Hee-soo promises drinks are on her once the trip is over, and Taesoo would walk through a car crash to be there. But as he reaches his apartment and his finger hovers over the electronic lock, the reality of his neighbor sets in. Mia is back, and no matter how much he tries to focus on his new crush, his world is still shaking from the impact of his first love's return. He runs into her right outside the classroom, Mia clutching a grocery bag stuffed with snacks. When he teases her about eating like a grade schooler, she snaps back that she was planning to share them on the bus ride. The blood drains from Taesoo's face as the realization hits him like a physical blow. He stammers, his brain reeling at the impending social disaster. Wait, you're going to MT too? The air in the corridor turns frigid. Taesoo doesn't just ask her not to go. He pleads with a desperation that borders on cruelty. Could you not go? I don't want you to ruin my MT. Mia stands her ground, her eyes hidden beneath the brim of her hat, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and genuine hurt. She looks up, catching him off guard with a single, devastating question. What exactly is it that annoys you this much? What did I do that's so wrong? He tries to reach out, to explain the impossible tangle of lies and old feelings, but Mia slaps his hand away with a sharp crack that echoes through the empty corridor. Her voice is a jagged blade of ice as she retreats into her own space. So I told you, don't act like you know me. The door slams shut, leaving Taesoo alone in the dim light, wondering why every single bridge they try to build ends up in flames. The morning of the trip arrives with a cosmic punchline. The bus is overbooked, and Hee-soo stands there with a polite, helpful smile that unwittingly seals Taesoo's fate. She gestures to her personal car, offering the only solution left. So, I think you two will have to go separately with me by car. Taesoo and Mia lock eyes, the silence between them screaming louder than the bustling crowd. They aren't just going on the trip. They're trapped together in a confined space with the one person Taesoo is trying to impress. The MT bus is a chaotic mess of snacks and freshman nerves. But Na-hyun isn't looking at the scenery. She's scanning the rows, her internal radar pinging for a specific head of dark hair that's nowhere to be found. Her friend doesn't help the anxiety, leaning in with a smirk to suggest Hyun is just uneasy since you can't see your husband. Hyun's denial is loud enough to rattle the windows, but the frantic look in her eyes tells the truth. Taesoo is off-grid, and her childhood friend privilege just hit a dead zone. Then comes the social nuke. Taesoo isn't on a different bus, he's in the private car of the student council president Song Hee-soo, and he's not alone. The news that a freshman named Mia is also in that car makes Hyun's heart skip a very dangerous beat. Meanwhile, inside the sedan, the atmosphere is thick enough to choke a horse. Hee-soo is all smiles and hospitality, while the two siblings in the back look like they're being transported to a high-security prison. Mia stares at Taesoo like he's lost his mind. And honestly, she has a point. He's buckled in and wearing a full-face motorcycle helmet in the backseat of a luxury car. He tries to play it off as pragmatic. Life is precious, you know, but the moment Hee-soo's foot hits the gas, his paranoia is vindicated. The car doesn't just drive, it launches. The world becomes a blur of G-forces and high-pitched screaming as Hee-soo turns the highway into her personal F1 track. They survive, barely. At the rest stop, Mia is slumped over a wooden bench, looking like her soul decided to take the bus instead. Taesoo wanders over, leaning over her with a can of coffee like a peace offering from the land of the living. He explains the legend. Every upperclassman knows Hee-soo drives like she's outrunning a natural disaster, yet her car doesn't have a single scratch. It's a miracle of physics and terror that's left Mia questioning her mortality. Taesoo holds out the can, but Mia doesn't reach for it. She just looks at him, her eyes tired and distant behind her glasses. "I don't like coffee," she says, and the words hit Taesoo like a physical blow. In his head, there's still the kids in the park, the ones who shared every little preference. But the girl in front of him is a stranger wearing his ex-girlfriend's face. He stammers about the past, about how they used to always have it, only for her to cut him down with a clinical shrug. "Maybe you're mixing me up with someone else?" She stands up, the sunlight catching the edges of her silhouette as she delivers the final sentence on their history. She doesn't want to be enemies, and she clearly doesn't want to be friends. She wants the slate wiped clean. Her voice is steady, devoid of the fire she had in the hallway, making the request even more devastating. "So, could we just treat each other like strangers?" She acknowledges the absurdity of it. They go to the same school. They live in the same building. But seeing him is a trigger for a past she's buried deep. She isn't asking for a lie anymore. She's asking for an erasure. She bows deep, a perfect, polite junior addressing her senior, and the distance between them feels wider than the 5 years they spent apart. "Just treat me like an ordinary junior." The coffee can sits forgotten, a cold reminder of a memory that no longer has a home. That wasn't just a request, it was a clinical, polite execution of everything they once were. Taesoo watches her walk away, and in his mind the image of the girl he loved shatters like glass hitting pavement. He's left wondering why she even bothered to show up in his life again if she wanted this much distance. The Mia he knew is dead and buried, replaced by a woman who looks at him and sees nothing but a mistake she's trying to correct. A shadow falls over him, and it's Taesoo, her voice a gentle anchor back to the present. She catches him cloud-watching, her smile bright enough to wash away the gray film Mia left behind. Taesoo takes a breath and lets the old stories go. If mountains can change in 10 years, he decides 5 years is more than enough for a person to become a stranger. He doesn't need to understand Mia's transformation. He just needs to survive it. He looks at Taesoo, and for the first time in days, the static in his head clears. The heart that was just aching for a memory starts thumping for the woman standing right in front of him. The blush is involuntary, a sudden rush of heat that reminds him why he's even on this trip. The past is a graveyard, but Taesoo is the future, and she's never looked more like a goal worth chasing. Taesoo talks about making memories before graduation, her voice full of genuine warmth, and Taesoo finally finds his footing. He has one goal now: confess to Taesoo Sunday before she graduates. He walks past the trash bin and drops the coffee can inside. Even if Mia is back, he refuses to let his heart waver again. He's done being the guy who looks back. It's time to be the guy who moves in. But closure is hard when the person you're ignoring is currently wearing a full suit of riot gear. Mia returns to the car looking like she's ready to storm a castle, her trauma from Taesoo's driving manifesting as a literal suit of armor. Taesoo just laughs it off, oblivious to the fact that her helpful ride has turned a freshman into a shell-shocked warrior. Finally, the car pulls into the pension, the engine cooling as they arrive at the battlefield for the weekend. The other students watch the car unload with a mixture of pity and awe. Only Taesoo could walk away from a Taesoo-led road trip looking like he just stepped off a bus, while Mia is basically a puddle of blue metal. As they start to unpack, a new face breaks the tension: Shin Daebin, a freshman with a bright smile and a finger tapping Taesoo's shoulder. "Do you have a minute?" she asks, and Taesoo's quiet life just found its next complication. The sun dips below the horizon, and the official business finally wraps up. Taesoo stands center stage, a can of beer held high like a torch of freedom for the exhausted freshman. "All right then, with this, we'll wrap up this year's freshman orientation." The cheers are deafening, but for Taesoo, the real test is just beginning as the groups start to mingle around the fire pits. Taesoo takes one look at his assigned seat and realizes Taesoo has basically handed him a death sentence. He's the only guy in a group filled with the department's most popular freshmen, across the clearing. The other male students are looking at him like he just stole their inheritance. He can practically feel the heat of their resentment as they mutter, "Han Taesoo, that fucker." While everyone else is busy making cheers an Olympic sport, Mia is a block of ice. She downs her drink in silence, her eyes never meeting Taesoo's for more than a fraction of a second. She's keeping the stranger packed with lethal efficiency, looking at him with a gaze so sharp it could cut glass. "Do we have to clink and say cheers every time before we drink?" she asks, her voice dropping the temperature by 10 degrees. Taesoo is stuck with the influencer trio. You've got Ha Eunji, the study vlogger with 40,000 subscribers. and Du Yenwu, the pale, husky-voiced host of a horror radio channel. They aren't just students, they're minor celebrities, and their presence is exactly why this year's trip is so packed. The star of the show is Shin Dabin, a variety game streamer with over 300,000 fans. She's bubbly, famous, and currently leaning into Taesoo's personal space. Taesoo checks his phone, finding a text from Heesoo that explains the nightmare. "You're the safest bet, Taesoo." He can't tell if that's a compliment or a very polite way of saying he's too boring to be a threat. Dabin's eyes light up when Taesoo mentions an obscure game called Gukbap Story. It turns out they're on the same server, a coincidence that sends Dabin into a frenzy of excitement. But the real show is Mia, who nearly chokes on her drink when she hears the server name. She's trying so hard to play the stranger that she's vibrating with suppressed commentary. Dabin mentions a notorious gold farmer on their server, a guy who apparently caused enough trouble to become a legend of pettiness. Taesoo just rubs the back of his neck, his face the picture of deadpan honesty. That's me." Dabin freezes, the smile sliding off her face as she bolts for the bathroom, her brain short-circuiting at the revelation. Inside the restroom, Dabin is losing it. She remembers her master, the legendary Felon Power Angel, quitting the game in tears because of a jerk who scammed her for compensation money. That jerk was Taesoo. For years, Dabin has dreamed of getting even for her fallen mentor, and now the target is sitting right outside by the campfire. Dabin isn't looking for a physical fight. She wants a total emotional demolition. She imagines a classic romance trope. She'll make him fall in love, make his heart race, and right when he's ready to confess his soul, she'll stomp on it. "I'm gonna seduce him?" she declares, her eyes sparkling with the kind of madness only a dedicated gamer can possess. She marches back out, ready to launch her charms, but she's forgotten one thing. She's famous. Before she can even get close to Taesoo, she walks straight into a wall of muscle. 3 massive guys from the wrestling team are looming over her, their shadows swallowing her whole as she realizes her revenge is going to have to wait for an autograph session. Yeonwoo bursts back to the group looking like she's seen a ghost, screaming that Dabin is being surrounded. The tension spikes, the music in the background drops until they see the truth. Dabin isn't in danger. She's holding a tiny, impromptu fan signing for a bunch of blushing giants. It's an adorable catastrophe. The crowd scatters to help with the signing, leaving Taesoo alone for a split second. But before he can move, a hand clamps onto his jacket. It's Mia. Her face is drained of color, her delinquent persona completely replaced by genuine wide-eyed alarm. She pulls him close, her voice trembling as she breaks their silence. There's a problem in the girls' dorm. The crowd, the signing, the jokes, it all vanishes when Mia's hand clamps onto his sleeve. Her delinquent mask has slipped, leaving only the pale, wide-eyed girl underneath. She edges closer to him, her voice a sharp whisper against the orientation noise. There's a problem in the girls' dorm. They move like ghosts into the restricted wing. Mia doesn't point to a ghost or a broken lock. She points to a power outlet. It looks mundane until Taesoo sees the lens. His phone screen confirms the nightmare in glowing white text. "This is a Semmer," he nearly shouts, but Mia slams a hand over his mouth. "Shh." Outside, the night air is cold, but the adrenaline is still screaming. Taesoo watches her, wondering how she spotted a professional-grade hidden camera in a room full of luggage. Mia isn't interested in explaining her intuition. She's too busy pacing, her questions coming in a rapid-fire blur of who, when, and where. Looking at her now, Taesoo is hit by a ghost of a memory. 5 years ago, she wasn't a delinquent. She was a quiet girl tucked into a library corner, buried in books about human psychology. She'd lean over the desk, eyes sparkling behind her glasses, and drop her signature line. But why, though? The echo of that catchphrase makes the current silence hurt. She's using polite, formal speech now, the kind you use for a stranger, not someone who knows your favorite reading spot. She admits he's the only person she could turn to, a confession that tastes like a peace treaty after their blowout at the rest stop. She stops walking and turns, her posture stiffening. The stranger act is officially dead. "I need your help, Han Taesoo Sunbae." She remembers him as the boy who wouldn't stop until he found a missing console. The one person with a mind sharp enough to cut through this mess. They dig into the logistics over cold cans of Pocari Sweat. Mia's been thorough. She checked the other rooms, and they're clean. This wasn't a building-wide issue. Someone targeted their room specifically, and according to Mia, The device appeared in the window between her check-in and the orientation. The math is simple and terrifying. If the camera wasn't there when they arrived, it was planted while they were settling in. That leaves 3 roommates: the stoic Yeonwoo, the influencer Dabin, or the hyperactive Yoonji. It's an inside job, and the silhouette of the group feels a lot more menacing than it did an hour ago. Mia wants total secrecy to avoid starting a witch hunt, but Taesoo's mind immediately goes to Heesoo. She's the student council president, trustworthy, capable, and exactly the kind of person who could handle this without a scandal. Mia just stares into her can, the silence between them growing heavy. The tension snaps when a pair of orange pigtails pops out of the bushes. Hyun is swaying, leaves in her hair and a glazed look in her eyes that spells disaster for Taesoo's heart rate. She looms over them with a terrifying drunken grin. What were you two sneaking off to do? Hyun is a loose cannon with a megaphone. She starts ranting about the coincidence of Mia moving in next door and the lie that they shouldn't act like they know each other. Taesoo watches in horror as his carefully constructed web of lies is shredded by a girl who apparently just took down the entire wrestling team before her first drink. The rage turns into tears. Hyun collapses, sobbing about how Mia said she and Taesoo were long over. She points a trembling finger at Mia, wailing, "Such a liar." The accusation hangs in the night air long after Taesoo carries her back, a bitter reminder that no one in this trio is actually telling the truth. The sun rises on a morning that feels entirely too quiet. Taesoo steps out to find a crowd gathered, the air thick with the kind of murmurs that precede an execution. Before he can even find Mia, a scream pierces the courtyard. It's Yoonji, and she's pointing a finger like a loaded gun. I saw it. The world stops. Yoonji isn't the victim, she's the accuser. She shrieks for everyone to hear that Mia was the one caught installing the camera to spy on her own roommates. Mia stands frozen, the finger inches from her face, as her attempt to solve a crime is twisted into the ultimate social execution. The silence of the morning is shattered by a finger pointed like a loaded gun. Yoonji is hyperventilating, her face twisted in a mask of righteous fury as she screams for the whole world to hear. I saw it. She's not just accusing Mia, she's performing for the crowd, labeling her own roommate a predator who tried to secretly spy on our room. The courtyard erupts into a low, ugly buzz. Dabin clings to Taesoo's arm, her voice trembling as she wonders why Mia Unni would ever do something so repulsive. Taesoo keeps his face steady, patting Dabin's hand while his eyes never leave Mia. He knows the truth, but he has to play the part of the oblivious senior for just a few more seconds. Mia adjusts her glasses, her expression unreadable behind the glare of the lenses. She didn't expect Yoonji to come at her head-on like this. It's a classic influencer move. Yoonji isn't just a roommate, she's a famous YouTuber who lives for the spotlight and social execution. She's pivoting from suspect to victim before Mia can even open her mouth. Mia's mind flashes back to the dark of the woods last night, with Taesoo carrying a drunken Hyun on his back. He'd looked so calm when he told her how to handle this. No interrogations, no searching through bags. He told her the best strategy is simple, just make the culprit reveal herself. Taesoo's logic was cold and surgical. People are most defenseless right after waking up. That's when they're relaxed, when they let their guard down, and when they'll panic the most if they think their secret is about to be snatched. Right now, only 3 people know what's actually happening, and one of them is currently screaming herself hoarse. Back in the light of day, Yoonji is fishing for witnesses, begging the other girls to back her up. She claims she saw Mia poking around her stuff and tucking something into her pocket. The trap is set, and Yoonji is stepping into it with both feet, convinced she's won. Taesoo watches from the sidelines, his hand twitching. He's ready to step in if it gets physical, but Mia doesn't need him. She looks at Yoonji with a bored, almost pitying smile and pulls the dangerous object from her pocket. It's a toothbrush. The sheer absurdity of it stops Yoonji mid-breath, her face paling as Mia tilts her head and asks, "But a camera?" Desperation starts to smell like sweat. Yoonji starts babbling about phone calls and secret videos sent to famous people, her lies becoming a frantic, tangled mess. Mia just steps closer, her shadow falling over the smaller girl. She holds out her phone, screen glowing, and delivers the killing blow. Call logs, messages, gallery, whatever you want. Mia doesn't stop at the phone. With a violent, sweeping motion, she dumps her entire life onto the floor. Bags of masks, notebooks, and personal items clatter against the tiles. She's smiling now, that sharp, dangerous grin that says she's stopped playing roommate and started playing predator. She's even offering her snacks now, her voice dripping with a fake, sugary sweetness that makes the skin crawl. Taesoo watches her, his heart hammering against his ribs. He knew Mia was tough, but this is an execution. She's dismantled Yeonji's social standing in under 3 minutes, and she hasn't even broken a sweat. Taesoo's internal monologue reveals the real insurance policy. He'd wiped a bit of his own hand cream on the camera, a scent tag to find the thief. But the thief never tried to retrieve it, meaning they didn't even know they were caught. Yeonji's frontal attack wasn't just aggressive, it was a move made in total, arrogant ignorance. Eunji is cornered, and cornered animals bite. She's shaking, her eyes wide and bloodshot as she realizes the crowd is turning. She points one last time, her voice cracking into a high-pitched shriek. Her body, check her body, it's a pathetic final gasp of a dying lie. Mia goes still. The playful mask slips, replaced by something cold and jagged. She takes off her glasses, and without them, her eyes are terrifying. She gives Yeonji one final, lethal chance to walk away. I'm giving you a chance, Yeonji. It's not a suggestion, it's a mercy she's about to withdraw. Taesoo starts forward, his voice tight as he tells Mia to stay calm. But he freezes mid-step. Mia's jacket hits the floor, then her shirt. She isn't starting a fight. She's ending the argument with a level of commitment that borders on insanity. The crowd gasps as she prepares to prove there's nowhere left to hide a camera. Standing there in a sports bra, Mia lets her hair fall loose, shaking it out with a mocking, predatory grace. She looms over Yeonji, her voice a low, terrifying whisper. Do you want to say I hid it in my hair? The psychological pressure is physical now, a weight that's crushing the last of Yeonji's nerve. Mia leans in, her eyes burning with a dark, triumphant light. She's won, and she wants Yeonji to feel every second of her defeat. Should I take everything off? Would that finally satisfy you? The girl who is supposed to be the invisible outcast has just become the most dangerous person in the room. The air between them finally snaps. Mia stands there, shivering just a little from the adrenaline as Taesoo steps in to drape her jacket back over her shoulders. The silence is thick with the realization that she actually went there. She dismantled her own dignity to bury an accusation. Taesoo looks down at her, his voice a mix of concern and bafflement. Was it really necessary to go this far? Mia doesn't answer, her cheeks flushed as the weight of what she just did sinks in. Behind them, the search turns up nothing, and Yeonji collapses into a heap of terrified sobs, finally gasping out, I'm sorry, it was my fault. President Taesoo moves in like a pro, clapping her hands to disperse the crowd and bury the drama before it can ruin the department's reputation. She's all smiles and smooth transitions, announcing that the misunderstanding is cleared. But as the crowd filters out, Mia remains the center of gravity. She's not looking at the president, she's staring right through the situation, her hair wild and her posture predatory. Even with the apology in the bag, Mia isn't done. She leans over to Taesoo with a look that says she's playing a much deeper game than anyone realizes. Mia grabs Yeonji like a hawk snagging a rabbit, wearing a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. She tells the group she just wants to talk privately to avoid any lingering awkwardness, but Yeonji looks like she's being marched to a gallows. Taesoo follows a few steps behind, watching his sister play the room with terrifying efficiency. Once they're isolated on a bench, the mask drops. Mia leans back, crossing her legs with a cool, sharp authority. All right, let's hear your side of things. Taesoo dangles the power strip, the same one Yeonji thought she'd hidden, right in front of her face. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't have to. He asks her plainly why she set it up, and what her goal was, letting the silence do the heavy lifting. Yeonji's eyes are wide, darting between the device and the two people who clearly outplayed her. She stammers, trying to figure out how they even have it, when a sudden tada cuts through the tension from behind. Hyun pops up with a grin, pinching the cheek of a miniature Yeonji in her mind as she reveals the truth. I had it the whole time. While Mia was performing her high-stakes strip-down to keep every eye fixed on her, Taesoo had called the other girls out using the president's name. It was a classic pincer move. With the room empty, Hyun slipped in and snatched the evidence, leaving Yeonji to realize she was chasing a ghost during the entire search. Taesoo looks at the girl he's known for a decade and simply sighs. I guess it must have been confusing. Taesoo explains that Yeonji's biggest mistake wasn't the camera itself. It was the glance. When the three of them were leaving the room earlier, Yoonji was the only one whose eyes flicked toward the power outlet. It was a tiny tell, but for a guy like Taesoo, it was a neon sign. He pulls a tiny memory card from the device and holds it up like a trophy. When they checked the footage, the very first thing they saw was a clear, high-definition shot of Yoonji's face as she turned the camera on. Eunji's defense is as small as her spirit. She claims she didn't have bad intentions, that she's had her things stolen on trips before and installed the camera purely as security for her luggage. The footage backs her up. It was always pointed at the bags, never the beds. But once Mia noticed the device, Eunji spiraled into a total panic, convinced her reputation would be nuked if anyone found out. She wasn't a mastermind, she was just a girl who broke under the pressure of her own secret. Mia looks at the sobbing girl and realizes she's looking at a mirror of her own old self, someone so desperate to protect what they have that they destroy themselves in the process. She tells Yoonji that if she'd had bad intentions, she wouldn't have only filmed the bags. It's a moment of surprising grace from the girl who just threatened to strip in front of a crowd. Yoonji can only bow her head and offer a tearful "I'm sorry," realizing she's been spared by the person she tried to destroy. Mia stands tall, her voice clear as she declares, "All right, I'll trust you." It's a total shift in the social hierarchy. Taesoo and the others watch, stunned by how easily she commands the space. Yoonji looks up, her face streaked with tears and disbelief. After the psychological warfare and the public shaming, she can't understand why Mia is being kind. "Are you really okay with this?" she gasps, but Mia's eyes have already hardened into something cold and professional. The mercy was just the first half of the deal. Mia leans in, her shadow looming over Yoonji as her expression goes dark and terrifying. "And if you're lying," then she doesn't finish the sentence, but the look on her face is enough to send Yoonji scurrying back in terror. Taesoo watches from the sidelines, his heart skipping a beat for a different reason. He sees the girl he loved, but she's wearing a mask of cold, calculated power. Hyun whispers beside him, wondering if this is really the same Mia they once knew. Taesoo just stares, his eyes heavy. A different person, huh? As night settles over the mountains, the tension finally begins to bleed away. Hyun walks close to Taesoo, her voice barely a whisper as she thanks him for helping without making her explain herself. She admits she was worried he'd just ignore her after how harsh she'd been. Taesoo looks at her, the moonlight catching the tired lines on his face. He doesn't offer a grand apology, just a quiet acknowledgement that he might have misunderstood her too. It's a small bridge built over years of unspoken resentment, and for now, it's enough to end the commotion. The secret stays between them, but the reputation change is permanent. Yoonji hands over the memory card and promises to cooperate, but the other girls surrounding them have a different reaction. They swarm Mia, crying and apologizing for ever doubting her. They don't see the delinquent anymore. They see a cool older sister who stood her ground. Mia is visibly sweating, her arms raised in a defensive stretch as she tries to handle the sudden affection. Taesoo watches her struggle with her new popularity, a dry question on his lips. "By the way, are you going to be okay?" Taesoo can't let it go. He mentions the whole taking off her clothes bit, asking if she isn't embarrassed to go back into the dorm now. Mia freezes, the reality of her insanity finally catching up to her. Her face turns a shade of red that defies physics. She stammers out that it was just a sports bra and she was only doing it because Yoonji wouldn't listen. She practically screams at him to get the right idea, her voice cracking as she blares, "I'm not that kind of girl, okay?" The legendary Ice Queen is currently melting into a puddle of pure mortification. The banter softens as they walk. Taesoo realizes that if Yoonji had actually been lying, Mia would have called the police without a second thought. She's cold, but she's not cruel. Mia waves it off with a wink, claiming her only goal is to graduate peacefully without any trouble. She's all smiles and casual gestures, but Taesoo looks at her like she's just declared her intention to fly to the moon. Peacefully, "What?" he mutters, already feeling the next disaster looming on the horizon. Mia's peaceful school life lasts exactly 5 seconds. As soon as they turn the corner, they're hit by a tidal wave of noise. A crowd of students, including some absolute units of men with glow sticks, screams in unison. Mia is physically shoved back by the sheer force of the adoration. Girls grab her hands, their eyes sparkling with a terrifying intensity. "Why were you hiding how cute you are?" they shriek, pulling at her like she's a limited edition plushie. Mia's eyes go completely blank. The predator has just become the prey. Taesoo gets caught in the crossfire, his friends practically strangling him for an explanation about his 60. while Mia is dragged off to have her tacky sweats replaced. She hasn't even realized that her one moment of reckless bravado has made her the mascot for the whole department. To everyone else, they're metacom, but to the rest of the school, they're weirdo-com, and Mia just became their queen. She lets out a strangled "hold on a sec" as she's carried away into her new, very loud life. She definitely left her mark as someone unforgettable. The university debut arc is over, but for Han Taesoo and Cha Mia, the real trouble is only just getting started. The final night of the MT is a fever dream of forced fun and high-stakes social networking. Ha Eunji is currently screaming into a soju bottle like her life depends on it, trying to scrub the hidden camera awkwardness out of the air with sheer volume. Meanwhile, Cha Mia is learning that the price of being a hero is being treated like a communal pet. The seniors are practically vibrating with excitement, ready to drag their new favorite cute, Junior to the department store as soon as they hit asphalt. Taesoo watches the crowd swarm his sixter, knowing this fame has a shelf life of at least 3 months. He can only sigh as Mia gets a snack shoved into her face with a cheerful, "Come on, Mia, I'll feed you this snack. Say a." Taesoo's brain is doing the math on his wasted weekend. He skipped 2 days of work and actual income for some quality time with Song Hee-soo, and so far, his total solo minutes with her sit at a crisp 0. Just as he spots a gap in the crowd to make his move, the universe and the student council president have other plans. Hee-soo leans in, and for a second he thinks this is it. But the only thing she wants is a refill. "Taesoo, could I ask you a favor?" She hands him the credit card like a consolation prize, sending him on a solo trek to the convenience store for more booze. He's the most overqualified delivery guy in the country. The girls' dorm is a tactical disaster zone of group photos and drunken giggling, so Taesoo slips out into the cool night air alone. It's quiet out here, too quiet. It gives him time to actually think about the girl currently being mobbed by the freshman class. Seeing Cha Mia again after 5 years was supposed to be a shock to the system, but the real mystery is the person she's become. The glasses are gone, the quiet library corners have been replaced by sharp glares and a delinquent's edge. What bothers him most isn't the hair or the attitude. It's the composure. During that camera scandal, she didn't just stay calm, she was clinical. She knew exactly what a hidden outlet-type camera looked like. It's the kind of knowledge you don't pick up reading fantasy novels in a high school hallway. Taesoo stares into the dark, his pulse quickening with a realization he's been avoiding. Whatever happened in those missing years, it wasn't just nothing worth mentioning. Speak of the devil and she appears, standing under the moonlight like a moody protagonist, until she sees Taesoo and bolts like he's the cops. She doesn't get 3 steps before her feet tangle, and she hits the dirt with a very uncool "ah." Taesoo rushes over, hand outstretched, but Mia glares up at him like he's caught her in a crime. "Why are you so surprised? Like you've seen a ghost?" She doesn't want help, she wants an escape. "Could you pretend you didn't see me?" she pleads, offering a bribe of future ice cream just to be left in the dark. It turns out the campus queen was just a fugitive from her own fan club. Mia admits she thought the seniors had sent Taesoo to drag her back to the harassment of being loved. They walk together, the tension of the day finally beginning to bleed out into the night. She looks at the ground, admitting that while the seniors are intense, they're actually good people. It's a level of social maturity he didn't expect from her, and it makes the distance between them feel even wider. The scenery triggers a memory, sharp and vivid. Taesoo looks at the hillside and sees a ghost of their high school days, the back hill where they'd rot away hours with library books. He can still see her, head resting on his lap, completely lost in another world until the sun went down. He lets out a small laugh, unable to resist poking at the memory. "Remember when you cried on my lap over the protagonist dying in one of the books back then?" Mia's face goes beet red, but he doesn't stop. "Your tears and snot stain my pants." Taesoo's laughter is the first honest thing he's felt all weekend. For a second, the sister lie and the money worries don't matter. But Mia watches him with a soft, almost mournful expression, noting how easygoing he's become. He brushes it off as social tricks learned from endless part-time jobs. But the heavy strain of the grocery bags in their hands says it all. The sun-drenched library days are over. They aren't kids anymore, and the ease between them is a borrowed moment in a much more complicated life. The mood shifts to the here and now, heavy and cold. Mia stops walking, the light from a nearby lamp catching the exhaustion in her eyes. She admits that her coldness wasn't about hate. It was a strategy. I wanted to keep some distance. She thought acting like a stranger was the only way they both survived university without breaking. She reminds him of her warning on the first day, "Let's mind our own business." Sunbae, it wasn't a threat. It was a plea for a clean break. Taesoo is speechless. He's spent weeks navigating her thorns, never realizing she was using them to keep him from getting pricked. She looks up at the moon, wondering aloud why the universe keeps shoving them back together after she worked so hard to disappear. If on that day at the police station or at school we hadn't met again, I wouldn't have acted so cold towards you. She offers a small, heartbreaking smile. I'm sorry, Han Taesoo. She offers him a deal if he really insists. She'll tell him about the past. They're stuck together until graduation anyway, and avoiding each other is clearly a lost cause. But then she drops the anchor. Moreover, once we graduate, I will no longer be around, you see. She says it with a terrifyingly peaceful smile. Taesoo feels the air leave his lungs. This isn't a reunion, it's a long-term goodbye. He realizes that if he digs any deeper into her scars, he might just accelerate the moment she vanishes for good. The moment is shattered by Heesoo's voice calling out for Taesoo, pulling him back to the chaotic energy of the MT. He watches Mia's back as she starts to walk away, her figure framed by drifting cherry blossoms. A sudden visceral fear hits him, a flashback to the day she first disappeared without a word. He reaches out a hand, almost instinctively, as if he could physically stop her from becoming a memory again. They're dragged back into the lion's den of the common room, where the seniors are practically foaming at the mouth for their drinks. Mia slips back into her cute junior mask with a practiced he, blending back into the noise like she hadn't just promised to leave his life forever. Taesoo stands on the periphery, the celebratory atmosphere feeling like static. The MT is over, the mysteries are piling up, and the peace he was hoping for feels further away than ever. The ride back should have been the end of the drama, but the road has one last trick, a sudden screech of tires, a violent lurch, and the world tilts. Taesoo doesn't just fall, he lands. He finds himself pinned against the seat with Song Heesoo practically in his lap. Her face inches from his, her breath warm against his skin. The silence in the car is deafening, and the look in her eyes is something far more dangerous than nostalgia. This isn't how his confession was supposed to start, but it's exactly how a disaster begins. The world stops with a violent screech of tires and a lurch that throws everything into chaos. In the cramped, sudden silence of the car, Taesoo finds his breath stolen, not by the crash, but by Song Heesoo's heavy frame pinned against him. Her face is inches away, her expression a mix of shock and something far more dangerous. He can only manage a weak, breathless ah as the romantic tension he's been chasing all weekend finally explodes in the worst possible setting. The spell doesn't just break, it's pulverized by a synchronized chorus of fake coughs from the back seat. Mia and Haeun are loitering in the rear like two wardens of a very awkward prison, their eyes burning holes through the headrests. Taesoo realizes with a sinking heart that his big moment just became a four-person disaster. Nothing happened, he laments internally, fully aware that the presence of these two unwanted guests has turned his cinematic confession into a comedy of errors. With the car back in motion, the tension shifts from romantic to interrogative. Haeun doesn't do subtlety, she goes straight for the jugular, staring Mia down with a gaze that could melt lead. She's not buying the stranger act for a second. The question hangs in the air like a threat. You didn't avoid the bus on purpose? Mia counters with a forced, playful aggression, smothering Haeun in an unwanted hug to deflect the heat. But as she pulls away, her gaze drifts to the back of Taesoo's head, a silhouette that's haunted her for 5 years. She doubles down on her lie, framing their entire history as a childish mistake. Dating that guy, it was nothing more than a brief thing during middle and high school. Mia decides that if she can't have him, she might as well play matchmaker to prove she's truly moved on. She moves in close, a mischievous shadow crossing her face as she offers to help Haeun seal the deal. But the joke lands with a thud when she asks the one question Haeun wasn't prepared for. Does Han Taesoo really not know that you like him? The arrow of truth hits Haeun so hard she practically physically deflates. Haeun hides her burning face, lamenting that a decade of tutoring has cursed her with the permanent label of younger sister. Mia starts to laugh, only to realize the situation outside the windshield is far more pressing. She points a finger, her eyes sharpening as she spots the two figures standing by the car. That should be tackled first, she says, gesturing toward Taesoo and Heesoo, the real competition currently existing in a world of their own. A week passes, and the dust of the MT trip should have settled. Instead, the campus dynamic has been flipped on its head. The student who once hid behind glasses and a disguise is now the center of gravity for the freshman. Mia walks through the cherry blossoms, not as a delinquent, but as a reluctant idol, with a trail of admirers following in her wake. The most shocking transformation isn't Mia's, it's her former bully, Ha Eun-ji. The former rival who tried to ruin her is now a total fanatic, trailing Mia like a lost puppy with a camera. Mia has ditched her disguise entirely, though she claims it's only because her seniors threatened to dress her themselves if she didn't fix her style. "I'm really not interested," she mutters, looking more like a captive than a queen. While Mia struggles with fame, Hyun is busy making her move. She catches Taesoo after class, practically vibrating with nerves as she suggests they go look at the flowers together. It's a classic romantic setup: cherry blossoms, a sunset, and a chance to finally break the sister mold. But as the words flower viewing echo in Taesoo's head, his brain isn't thinking about romance, it's doing math. Hyun arrives at the park expecting a stroll and a confession, only to find Taesoo standing behind a neon yellow safety sign. He hasn't come for the scenery, he's come for the profit. He's set up a full-blown instant photo booth right in the middle of the path. "Instant photos for sale, 5,000 won," the sign screams. Hyun can only stare in horror, her romantic dreams dying a very public death. Oppa? What's this?" Taesoo explains his logic with terrifying precision. He won a camera years ago and realized that selling photos now is the only way to beat the second-hand market depreciation. Hyun is beyond flabbergasted, yet as she watches him bark prices at passing couples, she finds herself falling into her old habit of making excuses for him. This is also a type of flower viewing, she tells herself, her heart once again proving that it has no standards when it comes to Han Taesoo. Despite the commercialized chaos, Hyun is undeterred. If 100 tries won't work, she'll try 1,000. But the piece is short-lived as a sharp, confident voice cuts through the cherry blossom static. 5,001 per shot. A new girl steps into the frame, a bright smile and an air of confidence that immediately puts Hyun on edge. She doesn't just want a photo, she wants to pick her partner, and her sharp gaze suggests she's already made her choice.